Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. I'm very happy to welcome back famed photographer Jeff Cable. Jeff, what's happening? How you doing today?
I'm hanging in here.
Hanging in there. I like it. How's the weather over there?
Actually, we had a little bit California. We actually had a little bit of rain last night. I think the first time in 10 years. So uh, we'll take every little bit we can get.
Beautiful. I think you guys are in sync. We got a little rain yesterday, probably a little warmer over there, but we're hanging in there.
Yeah, well, we're in such a drought here that we'll take. You guys have had rain. We've had any, so we're happy to get it.
That's it. I'll start collecting some and sending it your way. All right.
That'd be expensive FedEx, but okay, give it a try.
Awesome. So for everybody, thanks for joining us from YouTube, Facebook, all of those different avenues. We're excited to have you over here. Jeff is going to be talking about shooting the Summer Olympics during a pandemic. So, he's back. He's got a little bit of rest underneath his belt, not a whole ton. So, forgive him if he's a little jet lagged. But he's going to be talking about that. So if you have any questions, make sure to get them in. Jeff, I know we got a lot to cover in a short amount of time, so I'm going to hand the ball over to you. Thanks for being here. Thanks to our sponsors at Canon for setting this up, and I'll see you in a little bit.
Cool. Sounds good. And I assume we're set up for screen share, right?
Yeah, you just have to share your screen. That's all.
Got it. Yeah, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
So I've been back from the Olympics for a couple of months, but actually I only came home for 5 days and then turned around, went to Africa for a month on photo tours, and then came back, and it has been crazy ever since. So I don't recommend being away from home for 3 months. It's hard to get back into the swing of things and get caught up on everything. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get into this. It was a crazy time at the Olympics, so let me just go full screen. Hopefully that works for everybody.
That's working.
And good. I'm going to take you through what it was like. It was a very different experience this time. This is my 7th Olympic Games covering for Team USA. So my first Olympics was back in 2008 in Beijing. We'll be back there again in another 4 months for winter, which will be really interesting. But after that, I did Vancouver, London, Sochi, I did Rio, Pyeongchang, and then Tokyo. And the Olympics in itself is always a huge challenge, but clearly way more of a challenge this time, being that they moved it a year. We had to change our schedules out by a year. And of course, all the COVID protocol, we'll talk about that in a second. The best part of a normal Olympics is that I'm at the Olympics. I treat everyone like a once in a lifetime experience. Very excited to be there. So I'm still, even though this was different, it was still good to be there. We have the best seats in the house. We do get great views of everything. We're down by the athletes usually, and you'll see that in the photos that I'm going to share with you. It is a great place to be. And we're photographing the best athletes in the world. We have cool access, great transportation normally. We'll talk about that as well. But there were a lot of challenges at this one. Even though it was great to be there, there's the positive and the negative. The shot you see at the bottom of the screen there is from opening ceremonies, and all the blue in the background, it looks like people, but those are just place cards on the seats to kind of make it look like people. But as you all know, there was no one in the stands. There were no spectators. The toughest part about the Olympics, a normal Olympics, is that we have crazy tight deadlines. This is taken at the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. And my deadlines now are down to 15 minutes. So I've got a very short amount of time to go through everything I've captured and get it back to the team. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but basically I'm shooting an hour and a half event. I get back to each venue has its own press room. That's what you're seeing here. This is a press tent that was outside the hockey venue. We're jamming in there, and we're, I get the laptop open, get the memory cards out, cram them into the reader, download as fast as I can. I have to find the best 5 or 10, get them edited, retouched, resized back to the US in 15 minutes. And I was using the Canon R3 this time. We'll talk about some of those challenges a little bit because I shot a lot more images than I normally do. Another tough thing is the venues. And this was definitely true in Tokyo. The venues were really far from each other. And even ones that were close, there was one venue that was only half a mile from the main press center, and it still took 40 minutes to get there. It was due to traffic, bus schedules, and things. So getting from one venue to another venue, which seems like it should be easy, isn't or wasn't. I had people asking me, well, why aren't you covering more than 1 or 2 sports a day? and you couldn't physically get from one place to another. And of course, something I have a trouble with in the rest of my life is just pacing myself. I tend to be type A and go, go, go all the time. It's hard to actually kind of come down and find time to relax. I'm not very good at relaxing. The biggest challenges in Tokyo and the things that were really different at this Olympics, actually, I should start, and I did not put this in the presentation, was really the planning. As I mentioned, it got pushed by a year. There was tons and tons of emails going back and forth between us and the organizing committee and the USOC, trying to figure out housing and moving flights and what had happened at all. If it did happen, what was going to be the COVID protocol? As it turned out, we were COVID tested every day. At the Olympics, there were spit tests, so they were easy to do. But basically, the morning routine would be I'd have breakfast at the hotel, get on the press bus, head over to the main press center. Or if I had extra test kits, I'd just test myself on the bus. We had to wait half an hour after eating. So then we do the spit test and we drop it off at one of the approved drop-off locations. And then you just hoped every day that you were negative because you did not want to be quarantined there. So the second point there you'll see is that we were quarantined. I was coming from the US, so I only had to do a soft quarantine for 3 days. Of course, we had to have a lot of COVID tests leading up to our flights to Tokyo. We were quarantined, or we were tested at the Olympics. We were held, at the airport for, I think, 7 hours before I even got out of the airport because they wanted to get everybody tested. It was really a long day. So we flew for 13 hours, got to the airport, I believe, around 3:30 in the afternoon. I got to my hotel at midnight. Within that quarantine, I was allowed to be in the Olympic bubble. So on official transportation buses and then and in the venues, but I was not allowed to go anywhere in Tokyo. So no restaurants, nothing. We were allowed to go across the street to 7-Eleven and get a Diet Coke or a beer or food or whatever we wanted. And that was about it. The hardest part really for me was the venue reservations. Normally at the Olympics, when I'm shooting, if I get done shooting a certain sport, I'll say, gee, I want to head over. I got time. I'm going to go over and go shoot something else. And in this Olympics, you couldn't do that. You had to reserve your spot 24 hours in advance. And anybody who's ever done the Olympics before will tell you that we don't know what we're doing 1 minute to the next. So to plan 24 hours in advance was really, really a challenge. The other thing that was the most surprising was transportation. The Japanese people are very, very organized. And if you've ever been there and you take the subway system here, it is down to the second. If they say that a train will be there at 1:38, it's there at 1:38. Weirdly enough, that transportation was very much on time, but we weren't allowed to take it for the first 14 days because we were quarantined. So we had to use the press transportation, which is normally down to the minute. And weirdly enough, in Tokyo, there were sometimes the buses just didn't come, or they'd be 20 minutes late or 40 minutes late, which could mean missing your event, which contractually doesn't work. So it meant a lot of early mornings and getting up and taking buses hours and hours before I needed to, just to make sure I was there. That was tough. And the heat, it was oppressively hot. It was many days, 95, 98 degrees and humid. Luckily, most of what I shot was indoors. I did shoot a couple of things outdoors, and it was just scary hot. I was talking to one photographer who is on the deck of the beach volleyball, and he said it was 128 degrees Fahrenheit on the deck, mainly because you're on sand, but you had metal seats that were kind of going down in toward the sand, and they're all empty. So all that heat is coming off of them because there are no people sitting on them. The other thing that was a big challenge is that I was using a pre-production camera. I was using the Canon R3. What you see in the picture there is a Canon R5. I have a couple of those as well. Canon was limiting how much I could show me using the R3, which is why it's on that picture there. But using a pre-production camera, it was an amazing camera and I loved it. But there were some challenges with that I had to shoot RAW plus JPEG. Normally I just shoot everything RAW, but because I couldn't open a RAW file because the R3 didn't exist at the time, I had to shoot RAW plus JPEG, and that caused some issues, and we'll talk about that a little bit. The other normal thing that's tough about the Olympics is just competing with all the other photographers. So there's 2,200 other photographers. Typically, at the Summer Olympics, there were a little less at Tokyo because they pared it back because of COVID. But I try to get my safe shot. I'll show you those, and then I try to push myself, and I try to find really good shooting locations. But this is what our competition looks like. It's crazy. And this was taken back in London, and I put this in there to show you what it normally looks like. The only difference between this Olympics that you see here and Tokyo is they did have us socially distanced as well. Still crammed in though. The gear I took to Tokyo is my trusted cameras from Canon and lenses as well. So I had the R3, I had two R5s. I really thought that I would be mainly using the R5s and using the R3 sparingly because it was pre-production and I wasn't sure if I wanted to, use it the whole time. And once I started using it, I realized that that was the camera to use. I loved it. When I shot the R3, almost 95% of what I shot was with the R3s. Lenses, the 200 to 400 is kind of my go-to lens for all the Summer Olympics, just because it tend to be farther from the action. I love that lens. That was my go-to. I did have the 100 to 500, the new RF lens. I also had the previous EF 100 to 400 as well. I did use both of those at certain events where I didn't need or didn't want to take the larger lens. The new 7200 RF 7200, RF 2470, RF 13 to 15 to 35, and the fisheye. Although I didn't actually use the fisheye at all, I brought it with me just in case I'd need it, but did not use it at all. And of course, I did carry one flash. The Olympics doesn't allow any flash or tripod use within any of the venues, but I will show you a shot where I did use it. And so I bring one just in case. I do carry a monopod for sure because I want to have that for the 200 to 400. And I did carry a tripod, even though we can't use them in the venues. I thought that there might be a chance I'd be using it for shots around Tokyo. As it turned out, because of the quarantine, I really didn't get out to shoot much in Tokyo. And my think tank bags, lots of pro-grade digital memory cards. I had 5 portable solid state drives with me to back up, and my MacBook Pro 16-inch, which is my main retouching machine. This is a picture of the gear that I took with me. I set this up to get a shot before I left. You'll see the R3, 2 R5s, all the lenses and goodies that I have with me there to get me going. Now at the Canon booth, this is a behind the scenes at Canon in Tokyo. They told us normally, let me go back for a second. Normally I don't bring this much gear because Canon CPS is wonderful and has a lot of loaner gear for me to pick up when I get to the games. Because of the protocol, they didn't want loaners going out to everybody. So Canon wasn't even sure if they'd be able to loan anything. So I ended up bringing a lot with me. As it turned out, this is the back room. They did have a fair amount of gear, not as much as previous Olympics, but they did have a lot of loaner gear, which is just awesome because if we need something serviced or need to borrow things, we could. This is at Tokyo, little scaled back from the previous Olympics. This is the one in Pyeongchang. A little bit more, variety of product, but still great to have them there. So let's get into the images here. One of the things I love to do is capture that peak of action. And this is where the Canon R3 really comes in handy, because the Canon R3 allowed me to shoot at 30 frames a second, which was both great and terrible at the same time. Great because I could get shots like this, that moment of impact right into the face. I love that. I really haven't shot much boxing, so it was fun to use the 200 to 400, get in nice and close. I was sitting in the stands and shooting and get that split second here where I get the impact. And the good thing about 30 frames a second is I could do that. The bad thing about 30 frames a second is I have that many more images to go through after the game is over. And so water polo, where it's a little over an hour match, I typically shoot around 1,500 images. I was shooting 2,700 images a game. And again, with that 15-minute deadline, it was harder to go through and find the best ones quickly. Still managed to do so. And it was awesome at the end to be able to come back with images like this and get that split second that I was looking for. And this is my first time ever shooting basketball. I showed up, I had been in a different venue, and all I had was my 100 to 500 Canon lens. And it actually worked out great to kind of come in tight. I just sat behind the net, and this is Team USA versus France, and shoot tight, which is kind of fun. I did shoot for Team USA, for USA water polo men's and women's teams contractually. So I'm looking for that moment, that split second again, where they're just reaching out to stop that ball. And you can see that here, right? I'm getting the whole burst of them and taking the one that's the key shot that I'm looking for. Here with gymnastics, again, this is at the peak of her jump. I actually positioned myself so that the Olympic rings would be in the background here. So that's why I was sitting in that spot and hoping that I'd get some action right in front of me. And I bursted out probably 10 or 15 shots in that split second to get this one with her legs all, full out in extension here. There was a sport climbing. This is the first time this has been the Olympics. And it was fun to shoot because I love shooting things that are new and different. So it's fun to try something different here. I was watching this rock climber going up and just so casually grabbing and holding on just with one arm. The strength of these guys is amazing. So it's fun to kind of get his legs all the way out. He's not even really holding on at all here. Just all of his strength is right here. And so I love that. You'll notice I also framed this to include the Olympic rings at the bottom. And one of the things that I'm doing when I'm shooting the Olympics is I try to include those rings as much as possible to tell a story of where I am. Here's another gymnastics shot. This one's kind of interesting. I saw this woman here balancing the ring on her head, and I thought, oh, that's so cool. And I took the picture. And then out of the side of my eye, I saw this other girl come through and jump through it. I wasn't expecting that. And again, this is where having a really great burst rate is awesome because I could get it. I have the whole sequence of her going through, but this is the shot I liked where they're going right through the ring with her looking up. I would have preferred that the cameraman was not there, but that's out of my control. So I should go back for a second. One thing I should mention for those of you that are into photography and into the settings, typically when I'm trying to freeze the action like this, I'm looking for a shutter speed of around 1,000th of a second. So I'm looking at watching my ISO to make sure that I'm achieving that speed. I'm actually shooting aperture priority because there's a slight shift in light in this particular venue. When I shot water polo, it was very consistent, so I shot manual. It just depended on the venue, but always looking for about 1,000th of a second if I want to freeze the action. This shot here, this is Johnny Hooper from USA Water Polo, just coming out of the pool. And what I love about this shot is he's so high out of the water. Now remember, these guys are not standing on the bottom of the pool. They're using their legs, the strength of the legs to kick themselves up into position. And you can see his bathing suit. I mean, that's how high this guy is up in the air. And you see that I love the muscle structure and just the action of the water coming off the ball. Again, I positioned myself so I have the rings in Tokyo in that shot. So one of the things as a sports photographer that I have to constantly remind myself is it's not just the action, it's the reaction. And so many times there's a great piece of action and we're looking down at our camera to see if we got it and we miss the reaction. And so I'm consciously remembering, don't look down, don't look down. If something good happens, make sure you're still looking up. So this is one of the Canadian beach volleyball players. I was down, as you can tell, on the sand with them at that level shooting. I went there in the evening so that it was only about 80 degrees. It was a beautiful evening, as opposed to getting down there, it was 130 on the deck. It was also a really, really long walk. The press bus left us at one area, and we had to walk a good 15, 20 minutes just to get to the venue from there. So during the day, that would just be brutal. But again, the reaction here, they show a lot of reaction after a lot of shots, so it's a great way to get these types of photos. This one here of Katie, that's Katie Ledecky at her press conference. And I asked her if she could lift up her medals and like get a shot of her against this backdrop with the Tokyo logo in the background. And this isn't a reaction like you saw in the other shot, but I still love it. It still tells a story. This one here is actually a multi-exposure shot. I was playing around with multi-exposure in the Canon R3, which normally I reserve for action. I had it set for just 2 exposures, and it was just playing around, and I got this reaction. You could see kind of the victory and the demise of not having the victory here, the defeat and the victory here. And I just love it, even though you have the nose plug in from getting all bloody, it kind of still worked for me. Something different. This was Maggie Steffens from USA Water Polo. and Ashley Johnson, the goaltender in the background. And this picture makes me laugh because I've always wanted a good blood picture in a water polo because it's a pretty tough and aggressive game. And I've even joked with Maggie about this in the past. So when this happened, she took an elbow right to the face, to the nose, and she turned around and she said to Ashley, "How bad is it?" And Ashley goes, "No, you're fine." And then Maggie turned around like this, and Ashley has the look in the background of like, "Oh my gosh." And when Maggie saw this after the game, she's like, "Wait a second, Ashley told me I looked fine." And then she had this reaction. So we had a good laugh about that. I just love the action. And also, of course, I know that Maggie was fine. She didn't break her nose and she was totally fine the next game. A little black and blue, but no major issues. So I can laugh about it now. We're looking for these moments. This is one of the Russian athletes. He did better than expected in gymnastics. And, there's just that look that you can't fake. You can't say, "Hey, just give me this look and get that." I just love that moment. This one here, a very different reaction. One of the things as a photographer is we got to keep our eyes open all the time and be looking around at what's happening in front of us. So the play had stopped at this point, and normally, a lot of people would just put their camera down and take a break for a second. I saw one of our team, one of the guys of our team, looking at the ref like, "Hey, like, why didn't you make that call? There's a clear penalty." And I just laughed and I grabbed the shot, showed it to him afterwards. Just kind of something different and funny. So it's not the agony or the victory. It's something different, which is kind of fun. This one here, one of my favorite shots. This is right after that same rock climbing, the sport climbing that we saw, where he was up on that wall. He did really, really well. I believe he reached the top on this climb, which no one else had done yet. And he came off and he was so excited. And I just love that look. And it's kind of interesting because I had a camera boom here, I had a cameraman in the background, but it just works. It kind of just frames him. And, normally you'd say, "Gee, it'd be cleaner if all this wasn't there," but I kind of like it. It's just a little different. This one, he was also at the sport climbing. This is one of the US athlete, and he got a silver medal and was very appreciative. Again, a little different because they're wearing a face mask, very different than any other Olympics. By the way, I should have mentioned that we had to wear face masks 17 hours a day. So we could not take them off other than eating. So literally we were going, 8 in the morning till midnight or God knows when, 2 in the morning, wearing a face mask. And it was, I actually had a beard for a while and shaved it off because it just was so irritating. But it tells a story. A lot of people were talking about those particular masks because they were different looking. I just like the reaction of him thanking the crowd. I'll talk about my position. I was at a side position, not straight on, because I wanted something different. And I'll talk about that in a minute. I love this reaction. And this is a gold medal game for the women of Team USA. This is their third gold medal in a row. So London, Rio, and Tokyo. They're just absolutely dominant. The game, they crushed the other teams. So it wasn't even close. So they had already pulled Ashley, who's probably the best goaltender in the world. And they put the backup goalie in, which is great because I could get a shot of her, which I really wanted. But I just love the reaction. They know that they're getting a gold medal. And even with all that said, Adam, who's the coach, still has an intense look, even though they got this game in hand. It's kind of funny. But I just love the excitement in the girls. So one thing I tend to focus in on the eyes. It really is in the eyes. And most of the time when I'm shooting, unless I'm trying to just do something ultra creative, I want to get those eyes nice and sharp. So here's a shot taken with the R3. I was really low to the water. I was on my knees shooting. And one of the athletes came straight at me. And it's kind of cool to get the focus on the eyes and also have that water splash here kind of going through the other eye. I will say that I did use eye and face detection on some sports like gymnastics. For water polo, I found there was too much water distraction in the way. So I actually went to center point back button focus. So I set up my camera with a double back button focus. So one button, the AF on button, was a single point servo focus. And the second button, the asterisk button, the metering button, I turned into the eye detection and face detection button. It's really cool on the Canon R series cameras, the R5, R6, R3, that I can customize all the dials and buttons to make them whatever I want. absolute godsend when I'm shooting a lot of fast action like this where I don't have time to change settings quickly. This is again USA basketball. This is during France again, and this guy was getting ready to do a free throw, and I just love I don't know, just the look of him and the framing just kind of really worked, and the lighting in that venue was quite good. Here's Ashley. I told you that she's arguably probably the best female goaltender to ever play the game of water polo, and this one here, there's a couple of things about this shot that I love. I do love that her eyes are nice and focused. How high she's coming out of the water again. She's kicking herself into this position. You can see the ball here. She's going to stop the ball. There's no doubt. Her hand is right here. Her dark skin is absolutely gorgeous in the water. I just love the water reflection coming off of her skin. She's just, and just the calmness in her face when she plays in goal. And I think all of that comes through in this image. Again, I framed it with the Tokyo 2020 here with the rings. I even have the logo in the background here, but really it was getting these in the frame, because otherwise you can't really tell. Yeah, it says USA here, but she could be playing in some other international tournament. So I'm always thinking about that foreground and background. Simone Biles, and this was right after she decided that she would not be doing the balance beam. I had positioned myself by the beam. One of the reasons was to get her on the beam, and we were all surprised that she didn't perform. This is the first time in teams, and I was probably 2 feet from her. I had a 70-200 with me, and I just pointed that right at her and got that look in her eyes. She was looking up at one of the coaches, and again, tells the story. I think she was fine. She was very happy on the sides, but I think there's that moment of like kind of, I don't know, not sadness, but just kind of contemplating what this means that I see in her eyes there. When I was done shooting on the beam on the floor, which you'll see some image of in a little bit, I actually went up and shot straight onto the athletes just to get something different. A very tough shot to get right into their eyes here. I love this, the Japanese woman. I love the way her hair is kind of right down toward the beam too. It's kind of fun. This one here, I always tell people to focus on the eyes. I guess this one would be focus on the eye because she's only got one really showing. And this is in judo. The judo was actually in the Budokan Theater, which is a famous theater. As a kid, I used to listen to Cheap Trick live at Budokan, and so I knew that theater well. This is the judo there. I went to shoot one afternoon or evening, and this girl was getting beat up pretty good. And I loved it just because it shows, again, the intensity of what these people are doing, these athletes, to compete in the Olympics. So I've talked about backgrounds a little bit in the past, but I'm always kind of consciously thinking about when I'm shooting. So this is opening ceremonies. Well, this picture tells a lot of stories. The opening ceremonies was just about finished, or actually might have been finished. And I was packing up gear, and I looked over and I saw the flame was lit. And I have tons of pictures of the person lighting the flame. But in the background, I've got all these empty seats, which you don't normally see. I've got the Tokyo 2020 going across the banner, and I saw the heat from the flame kind of creating this distortion in part of the logo. And I just like that because I thought it told a story. So I shot that image. This one here, again, at that same basketball game, I got down low because I wanted that Tokyo 2020 banner that's up in the ceiling to be in the frame. So I got low and shot up on it. Same thing here. This is diving. And I went, and this is when they were doing it at the highest platform. And so I walked up into the stands, basically equivalent to where this guy's sitting on the other side. And I knew if I sat there, I'd have this in my frame at the top. I'd have the Olympic rings underneath here, and I'd be able to get the action of the divers. And you'll see there are actually people in the stands here. Those are not spectators. Those are teammates, competitors, other divers that were doing, that weren't diving that day or whatever it might be, other athletes that could watch. So, and then here's a photographer in a non-photographer position who shouldn't have been there. But basically, we were still limited. You would think that with no one in the stands, we could sit anywhere we wanted, and that was still not the case. They had photo positions just like any other Olympics, which was really weird. Because most of the time you'd think you could just go wherever you wanted because the stands were empty, but they didn't allow it. This is what I was talking about before, where I was actually down on the deck of the gymnastics on the floor shooting. And I really wanted to get these shots. This is for Team USA. Again, I got the rings. I've got Tokyo 2020 logo all through here. And in the background, yeah, I got all the empty stands, but nothing I could do about that. Got the other teammates over here. But again, I'm including all of this to tell the story. And this is another example where when I was shooting the judo, I sat and looked at where were the Olympic rings going to be. I found these rings on the wall in the background, and I literally waited for these two competitors to come right into frame so I could get the rings around them in the background. And of course, I also have it supported right here with the logo. Now, this one was easy because for BMX, they had this giant logo there, so I could wait for the BMX riders to come through, get in front of that logo, which didn't happen as often as I was hoping. But it was kind of cool to include that in the frame. I should have put another shot in. I shot from up here with a 15 to 35 wide angle. So I had their rings in it with everybody else in the background. It's a really cool shot. Sorry, I'll have to post it online. So one of the things about doing the photography at the Olympics is when you have that many competitors is trying to be unique and different. So I know that Luca has these rings on his arm, this tattoo. So I'm looking for that and trying to match it up to my background. The only thing that would have been better here is if the rings had shown on the ball. That would have made it even better. But I'm looking at those things to see how can I create interesting photos beyond just what I've been already taking. So if in case of water polo, I've got hundreds of shots of people taking a shot with the ball up in the air. I'm looking for something that would be different. This one made me laugh because I was shooting the BMX, and a lot of the times when I was shooting, the background was actually an apartment building. So I thought, well, I don't want to have an apartment building. I want something different. So I want the sky. So I walked to a different position, was hoping that someone would do a jump off this one jump. And this rider from Costa Rica did. And I shot it. And this is just luck. But it just so happened the same time I shot this and he was in the air, I had an airplane in the background coming off the airport. And so it was perfect timing. I took this, I looked in the camera, and again, one of the great things about the mirrorless is I can look right in the eyepiece and see what I got. And I thought, there's my shot. I'm not going to get better than that of anything in the air. So two entities flying in the air at one time. This one here during the beach volleyball, again, I got tons of shots of beach volleyball. This is during the men's game. I kept seeing the sand coming off the ball. I thought I'd try something different and just isolate that. This is that same position you saw before for diving. The only difference here is I slowed the shutter speed down to about 80th of a second and followed the divers as they're going. Again, if you sit there and you just shoot diving the whole time at 1,000th of a second, it kind of gets boring. You kind of get your shot. And then everyone starts looking like every other one. So it was nice to actually try to pan with the athletes and get something different. And if you followed my work in the past, you know that I love motion panning and do a lot of it. And you'll see some more coming up here in a minute. Here's one. This is not one of the USA athletes, so I thought, okay, I'll experiment and try something different. So I slowed down the shutter. Now, again, I'm not using a tripod. Actually, I'm not even using a monopod here. I'm hand holding, and I'm holding on really tight because I want motion in the athlete, but I don't want all of these things blurred. So I'm holding on really steady at a slow shutter speed. Another motion pan during gymnastics. And of course here, I don't have to worry about all the cameraman and all these distractions in the background because they're all blurred. I'm following her face. So I've got her face nice and sharp and lots of motion in her arms and legs and things here. Here's three photographers that were on right by the floor, and you can't really even see them. Now this frame is, I'll call it a little bit of luck, a little bit of planning. As you saw before, I had been shooting on the deck in the sand and had tons of shots, thought, okay, it's time to try something different. So I walked all the way up to the top row of stands. There was a photo position up there and I started shooting and I thought, okay, maybe I can get some shots through the net. And right as I was shooting, maybe 15, 20 minutes after I started shooting up there, this Brazilian woman came and made this nice play, but she was perfectly framed by the net itself. And I couldn't have planned that much better. And the R3 still locked in on her eye, did not get fooled by the net, which is great. So I have this perfectly framed shot with her laid out in that net. And once I got that picture, I left. I'm like, okay, nothing's gonna be better than that one. And then I went back down. This is more of the multi-exposure. Again, that same match that you saw before, just trying something different. I really, I took this picture trying multi-exposure, although I knew that the best sport for that really would be fencing, but I thought it'd be fun to try here. But ultimately, my goal was to get this shot. And this is actually probably my favorite photo from the Olympics in Tokyo. It was hard to get. I'd done one similar in Rio, but it wasn't quite what I wanted. So I went, I did it. It was about a 5-hour investment to get over to fencing to get some photos, but I really wanted this shot. And so what I did is I put the camera in multi-exposure mode. I chose different exposures. In this case, I was at 4 exposures. I'm on a monopod, so I'm holding as tight as I can. I was actually shooting this with a 24 to 105, I believe, or 20, I think it's 24 to 105. And so because we were very close to the action. And I did a bunch of bursts waiting for that one that was just the right synergy. So if you look, the motion in my USA athlete of the 4 exposures are really nicely stacked. And the same thing is true here in the German athlete for the same thing. Not quite as good as the American, but pretty close. And even the helmet position is really nice with all 4. The foils are in different places, which is kind of fun. And even the matches in the background, they were on a break. And even this he's actually nicely positioned. Because normally I'd say, well, maybe I'll just take this guy out, which we're not allowed to do for the Olympics. We're not allowed to clone things out. But this all works. And so this is all in camera. This is not Photoshop. You could tell I was holding the camera very steady because the logo's nice and sharp. And I have this perfect movement here. And this is a great case where shooting RAW plus JPEG was the right thing to do. So this is a JPEG edit, but I can tell you that as soon as Adobe allows us to open up the Canon R3 RAW files, I will reprocess this image and probably do some slight tweaking to the white levels and the black levels and things. I'm waiting to actually play with the RAW file, but this is one of my favorite images. So that shot was planned that I just talked about, but I also play on some other shots. So I want to talk about that. So I went to the equestrian venue. I love shooting equestrian at the Olympics. It's a beautiful sport. The animals are amazing. I think photographically, it's just always pleasing. So I went there and I knew I was going to motion pan almost the entire thing. So this here is not a motion pan. This is taken at a thousandth of a second as the rider is coming over a jump. And the only 2, I mean, I shot numerous athletes at a fast shutter speed, but the only 2 that are in this presentation, the one you saw before and this one. And this is Bruce Springsteen's daughter, Jessica, who was riding for Team USA. And I didn't want to risk the shot in motion panning it in case I didn't get it. So I shot that in my safety mode of a fast shutter speed. And again, it's great. It's sharp on her face. You get the intensity. I love the red jackets and the logos and the colors here. I don't love the empty stands in the background, but again, my goal is to shoot at a shutter speed that wouldn't show that. So for the remaining 3 hours I was there, I shot everything at 20th of a second as opposed to a thousandth of a second. And I panned along with the riders and horses. So this is not what I was looking for. I was looking for the jumps, but just for fun, I decided to photograph some of the athletes as they were riding just to head toward the next jump. And I kind of like this one. It was something different. But the goal I was going for was something more like this. So by panning, all the judge here, the greenery, the jump, the empty stands, the logos, everything is blurred other than the face. And you could definitely get motion of the horse. And this is what I was aiming for. I will say that I shot a lot of images and probably came away with maybe 5 or 6 that I liked. This is one of them. This is another one. This one's showing a little bit of blur in the face, but it's sharper on the face of the horse. I like the position of the legs of the horse in this particular shot. But if you look at the face of this athlete versus this one, this is much sharper, but I still like this one. And this one here is even sharper. This is one of the US athletes I motion panned them, and I had all this interesting, these colored balls that were here in the front. So I thought that'd be a cool blur. And I got blur of the horse. You still see the American flag. He's tack sharp on the face. The only thing I don't like about it is it almost looks like he's bored. I posted this online, and people who are into equestrian said, no, it's actually good form. What he's doing is he's actually anticipating and looking at the next jump to plan exactly how he's going to attack the next jump. So that made me feel better. But I would almost like to have a little bit more, I don't know, excitement in the face there. Now, when you're at the Olympics, it's about celebrating that we're there. It's about athletes celebrating their accomplishments. So this is during the teams when USA won silver. It's nice to be able to get shots of them celebrating. This is that same sport climber that you saw earlier, who was thanking his coaches and everybody in the background. And I told you I was going to tell you why I shot from this position. Most photographers were shooting straight on because they want to get a straight on shot. Well, the background behind them was a white wall, and I didn't like it. Well, this is the doorway in the background that they walked out to come out for the competition and also for the medal ceremony. And I saw that I had these cool purple colors from the Olympics, as well as the Olympic rings. I saw that the podium that he would be standing for silver in this position. So I decided to frame it that way. And I like it because he's got good catch light on his eyes coming from the lighting in front of him. But I get this shot with the purple in the background, and I chose that. Again, just something different. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is a celebration. Whenever water polo teams win a tournament, they, especially a big one like the Olympics, they throw their coach in the pool and all the support staff. So there's trainers, coaches, assistant coaches in the pool with them. I just love the reaction of them winning that third gold medal. It was a great moment. Now, obviously, it's not just the action that we want to get for the celebration. It's getting the medals. One of the things that's very different about Tokyo is that normally I'd be right in front of them, about maybe 5 or 6 or 8 feet in front of them, to shoot them getting their medals. Because of COVID, they didn't want anybody near the athletes because there were a lot of foreign. Like I'm the team photographer, so I was around them quite a bit, but they didn't, they don't want strangers near them. So we had to shoot from the other side of the pool. So I was, I don't know, hundreds of feet away with a 200 to 400. I told the woman, I had texted Maggie, Ashley, Courtney, because some of the girls just said, hey, I'm going to be across the pool and high, look for me. And my contact at the team also told them to look for me. So one of the great things about being their photographer is I have the ability to, kind of coach them. So they did look right at me to get the shot, even though I was really, really far away. And I was at this venue probably 4 hours before the game even started to look at where the medal ceremony would be if we won gold and all this. And the venue manager, Arnold, said to me, there's this shot, and then we're going to walk them over to the other side of the pool. And the other side of the pool, everybody will be able to get shots of their particular team with the pool in the background. So I went and scouted that. And this is the shot where they brought them over. And this is the shot I told you about where I used a flash. Because what I noticed was if they were to come and stand on this podium with the pool being so bright in the background with these lights, they're going to be silhouetted. So I actually brought the Canon R5. So I had the R3 with me on the long lens. I brought the R5 with the shorter lens with the flash and popped a flash at -1 on them just to add enough fill light to get this so I'm not blowing out the background. I believe every other press shot of this photo that is out there on the internet is where people pulled to get their skin tones correct, and this is all blown out because I was the only one I think that actually brought a flash with me. So I got this shot, and I love this. This is actually on billboards, and this is being used everywhere by the team, which is a great honor. Love it. And then after that, they all walked to the left. They all went off to the left here. All the press went off to the right. I followed the team down onto the deck, and we had a big party on the deck for a couple hours. So what I really wanted to do, I said to the team, last two Olympics, we didn't get portraits of each of the women with their medals. Let's do that. And so I was doing portraits of everybody. You can see that they're actually having some margaritas. We had a little party out there, which was not supposed to be allowed, but hey, they can break the rules if you get a gold. And so anyway, it was just a lot of fun. And I told them after we got the formal shots that you saw already, let's do an informal shot with you guys. So I brought them all over and said, sit down, grab your drink, let's have some fun. And so it was fun just to get this picture. And these are some of the portraits I did. I did regular portraits, obviously, but I told Ashley, hold your medal out away from you and let's get a shot like this. And she really loves this one. But I like it because it's kind of fun to focus in on the medal. You still know who it is, or I know who it is, and she knows who it is. And it's just something different. This shot is one of my favorites just because it is the team after gold. And, this is me. And they said, no, we're not doing a team shot without you. You're part of our team. And that's just, it's an honor. And it gives me chills just thinking about it. So kind of go through the Olympics by the numbers. I was there for 21 days, of which 14 were quarantined. I walked 128 miles in those 21 days, spent way too many hours on buses, probably 40 hours on buses. The good thing is, ever since Rio, they put Wi-Fi repeaters on the buses. So we have very good Wi-Fi on the bus, which is great. So I can blog. I did write 45 blog posts. So I was doing about 2 a day at the Olympics. And it takes me a couple hours to write them between retouching the images and writing the stories. I had almost 500,000 readers of the blog, which is very humbling, really cool. Got about 5.5 hours sleep every night. Typical day at the Olympics is around 8 in the morning till around 2 in the morning, give or take. I took about 50,000 images. I kept about 23,000. And people ask me why I get rid of so many. Well, when you're bursting out at 30 frames a second, there's a lot of stuff that's not peak of action. There were times I was out of focus, or it just didn't tell a story, or it just wasn't interesting. So I purge all those, still have quite a bit. I still have 0.5 terabyte of images to back up here. So I should mention, and I put this in here as my shameless plug for my photo tours. As I mentioned, I got back from the Olympics for 5 days, went straight out to Africa. So we do have a bunch of photo tours coming up. Costa Rica coming up in December, that's sold out. That's actually oversold. Then we have Japan, which is also sold out, I believe. Costa Rica, Scotland, Ireland, Botswana, Tanzania, Indochina, Costa Rica, Cuba, and we're adding a bunch more right now to some other locations. So if you're interested in seeing any of the or going along with us, just send me an email and also check the website for new ones. This is how you get a hold of me. I'm just at jeffcable.com. The blog is just blog.jeffcable.com. My email address is jeff@jeffcable.com. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram are all just Jeff Cable Photography, and Twitter is jcable12 just because I like the number 12. I want to thank Canon immensely because not only did they sponsor this presentation, but Canon I've been using Canon my entire professional career, and they've been an absolute, they've been amazing. The quality of the products, the cameras, the lenses, everything they make has been outstanding. And the quality of support from them is equally outstanding. And I think that to me is as important as the equipment. So thank you to Canon. And now, Scott, if we've got questions or anything, fire away.
Awesome, Jeff. Thank you so much. First of all, congratulations, seven Olympics. That's a huge feat in itself. Way more times than I'll ever be at the Olympics as an athlete. So,
you need both.
So at least, you're getting there, you're out there, you're shooting. So let's start it off. Elizabeth asked a question that I was personally thinking about asking you anyway. So I'm glad she asked it and, it came from her. You talked a little bit about the planning. And, she mentioned, it seems you've planned for the trip equipment wise. How much do you plan for the pictures? What does that look like in terms of planning? You mentioned a little bit of it, but is it everything gets planned out, or is it kind of, day of, you sort of see it?
It's a mix. I mean, there's certain days, like if I'm shooting like the water polo games, I'm contractually obligated to shoot those. And those, I'm just looking for the best action shots or reaction shots I can get. And so there's planning, getting to the venue early, getting all the equipment prepped, doing all of that. I've got to be into the position. There's certain photo positions at each venue. So for water polo, there's certain spots I like better. So I get there really early and I put my gear on the pool deck early to make sure that I hold the spot. There's a lot of that kind of planning. The Olympics is a ton of planning in general. We're planning usually about a year and a half out, just in the travel and logistics and housing and security clearances, all of those things, contracts, things like that. But when I'm shooting, it depends. Like for the equestrian, I knew I wanted to motion pan it. I'd done it once before and really wanted to get something better. For fencing, I knew I wanted to do a multi-exposure shot. So certain planning, and sometimes you plan and it goes out the window and you just wing it. Other times you think you're going to wing it and you end up planning something last second. So it's a crazy environment at the Olympics. You're never stopping. You just go for 3 weeks. And there's almost no rhyme or reason to any of it.
So Popcorn's joining us from YouTube and wanted to know, obviously you mentioned this in the beginning, and I'm sure that plays a little bit into it, but, they tried to get accreditation to be able to shoot the Olympics, but obviously, like we said, this year, probably a huge, obstacle to kind of do that. But for the future, for, normal times, if we call them that, or just, going forward times, how would you recommend somebody who wants to be able to shoot the Olympics get involved in that?
Yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, the problem is if you look at how many credentials are out there and how many people want to do it, it's one of the top questions I get from people. And you're vying, like if you're in the US, you're vying for 60 spots for the entire country. And you've got people like, USA Today, you've got, major publications that are out there that are taking some of those credentials. So it is very difficult. I believe I'm the only independent photographer for the US that's not shooting for a publication. I'm shooting for the team. And so it's a question I get a lot, and a question I can't even really answer. I tell people the best thing to do is, if you're in a different country, is you reach out to your country's NOC, or the National Organizing Committee. But I mean, the odds are really slim. And it took me, really took me years and years and years to even get in the Olympic family. Now they know who I am. I've worked with them for, many, many Olympics. And so, I'm part of that family, as they call it, but it's a huge amount of work just to get there. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying don't try. It's just, get ready for a big challenge. I took a lot of no's before I got it.
There you go. Every no is one closer no to a yes. So,
well, and the other thing is, you build your portfolio. If you want to shoot sports, you start with, I started shooting our local swim club, and then I went to high school, then I went to collegiate levels, then I did some professional stuff. And then it's contacts. I tried to contact the team. I got the same answer as everybody else got, which is, no answer at all. No phone call back. But I had contacts because I shot for some of the pro teams. They could help get me my feet in the door, and some of the athletes that I knew that were going to the Olympics could help me out. So contacts is a big part of it.
Yeah. So we have Naveen here joining us on YouTube as well. Greetings from India. Thanks for joining us, Naveen. We appreciate it. What would be your best strategies for dealing with bad inclement weather in terms of transporting and using gear? And as well, what would you recommend as the best strategy for on-site backup of content?
Yeah, so great questions. So Naveen, for bad weather, I try to avoid bad weather as much as I can. I'll be honest with you, in all the Olympics I shot, I've never once used a rain cover. The sealing of the cameras on the Canon cameras is so darn good, and the lenses, that I've taken them out in rain and snow. Not heavy rain. Or if it's raining, I'll go undercover and shoot. So I prefer not to use the big sleeves over the stuff because it's just too cumbersome. But as far as transporting gear, that is planning. It was how am I going to fit what gear into what bags, and what bags do I have? I actually love the rolling backpack and the rolling airport bag from Think Tank. I knew what would fit and what wouldn't, and that was about a week before. I double checked to make sure everything would fit the way I wanted. And as far as on-site backup, I have on my possession a bunch of this is the Crucial solid state drive. And these are 2 terabyte drives. I took 4 to the Olympics. So every time I shoot, I would download onto my laptop. Every evening, I take everything I download on the laptop and move it to at least one, if not two or three SSDs. One would stay in my press locker room at the water polo venue or the main press center. One would be at my hotel room, and one would be with me at all times. And then, and I was Dropboxing favorite images or sending them directly here to my Drobo of favorite retouched images. So I know that those are still home when I get home, regardless.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, obviously, it's not a Q&A without some gear talk, right? We got to
I
talk
have gear talk. Yeah, yeah.
Got to talk gear. It's like the number one thing photographers love to do. That's what we're into. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
So Mark Goldberg's joining us here on Facebook, wants to know, how is the focus speed with the EF to RF converter, and did you use the one with the built-in ND?
I did not use the one with the built-in ND because frankly didn't need an ND. But I've used the converter a ton. I've got numerous ones. Look, I have one at the ready. Look, just in case someone asked. And I'll tell you what, the EF to RF converter is like using any EF lens. It's perfect. There's no delay in focus speed. There's no loss of quality, nothing. It's amazing. So really, if you have a collection of lenses, like the 200 to 400 that's behind me, I throw the adapter. I mean, hell, I used it, I used that lens on the R3 for the Italian Olympics almost. And that was with the adapter on it. Great. Zero problems at all. Yeah. So you can use your investment lenses until you switch out. I mean, there's advantages in using the RF lenses. They're smaller and lighter, like the 70, 200. I love that. But yeah, no, it works great. And I used it in Africa. I used the 100 to 400 along with the 100 to 500. I use the 100 to 400 with the adapter on the R5. Awesome.
So that's it. If you're thinking about getting it, we know a place that might sell that.
Well, and I'll tell you what, the interesting thing is that once you go mirrorless, and this is not because Canon's sponsoring us. Once you go mirrorless, you can't go back. Like I wrote to Canon last week and I said, because I've been shooting with the R5 or R6 and then in the R3 at the Olympics. And then I come home and I've got my 1DX and my 5D Mark IV and I can't use them. They drive me, like, I'm so spoiled by mirrorless that with the eye detection, face detection. I shot 4 bar mitzvahs this weekend. Actually, I shot 3 and my second shooter did one. And I did senior portraits yesterday. And man, the way it locks in on the eye is just so crazy good that I'm now in the process of making a move all mirrorless. And so, but I'm not going to get rid of that lens because I love the 200, 400. I'll just put the adapter on it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Now, Everyone wants to know, how do you frame for water polo? How do you carry a variety of different lenses on different bodies? What's your game plan on that?
So one of the reasons I like the zoom lenses is because at water polo, there's times when the athletes are at the other side of the pool or they're close to you. And so I've never understood, and don't take this wrong if you're a sports photographer and you love your 400 2.8, I get that. But to me, I don't get it because 400 sometimes is not enough or too much. So I love the 200 to 400 where I could just, zoom in and out. And so I'm always looking at framing that. Typically I'll put the focal point for water polo lower. So lower in the frame so that their face is down here. So I have room for their hand to be up and extend high above them. Because if you put the focus point dead center on the frame, their arm's going to come out of the frame and you'll miss the ball. So I tend to get low into to the pool deck, or maybe it's standing height at worst case, and shoot. But I try to frame it. Again, I'm looking at my background. I'm looking at the action. I'm looking at trying to get the focal point right on their head. Back button focus, lock in, and fire.
Yeah, talking a little bit about that. One of the challenges was obviously there were no crowds. There was nobody in the stands besides you guys and the staff, those kind of people. And I think that definitely adds in certain respects to an image. Sometimes you get an image where you've got an athlete or you've got the athlete celebrating and you've got the crowd in the background. How was that for you? How much of an obstacle was that for you to kind of overcome not being able to use that to your advantage?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, I was talking to one of the photographers as we on the flight over, and he shoots for USA Water Polo, good guy. And Kyle and I were talking and saying, God, this would be weird because usually half of your great images are the reaction of the crowd. Like we're constantly turning around looking for people that painted their face with the American flag or whatever, or cheering in their family. I mean, the family members, are the best to photograph because they're going crazy for their kids, and it's like, or their spouses or whatever, and it's like we missed all of that, and so it was we missed a dimension of the Olympics. The other thing is, normally when you're at the Olympics, you're sharing that joy of being there with all the people that are there with you. So when you're walking around the streets, everybody's happy because of the Olympics. You see tons of stuff in stores that you could buy at the Olympics. None of that existed in Tokyo. There's very little stuff to buy. There was no one wearing any, team whatever or national pride kind of stuff. It was just like another day in Tokyo, and it got easier. Like for water polo, it was first weird to be there with no one in the stands, because I'm used to their families being there and all the crowd. And then after a while, you just got used to it. And there were advantages. It was easier to get in and out of venues. You didn't have to worry about crowds. But it was the other thing that was weird is you could hear everything. So normally with the crowds, you don't hear anything. You could hear every word that they were saying to each other. And I will say that one of the goaltender for the men for Team USA, he has a mouth like mine where he throws a lot of F-bombs out there. And it was like, holy cow. And normally you would never hear that. You clearly heard it. And even gymnastics, I remember when they were doing the rhythmic gymnastics, you could hear their feet hitting the deck all the time. It was really bizarre because normally you'd never hear that. And so there were a lot of differences. It definitely lacked energy. I think Beijing may be the same, which is going to really be a drag. But it was still the Olympics, and the photos were still the photos, and I was still happy to get what I got out of it. So
definitely 100%.
Yeah.
Now, Bill's got a question for you on the flip side. First of all, he says, Jeff, you're the best. So that's number one. I agree with you, Bill. I think Jeff's the best too. I love having him here. Is there a sport or a specific sport event that you haven't yet photographed that's atop your sports bucket list?
Well, I wanted to do skateboarding at the Olympics and surfing at the Olympics. We're both new, and I just never could get there contractually. I just couldn't. It would overlap, and surfing was kind of far away. And the other thing about surfing was you could take the bus hours out there to get there, find out that the waves weren't good. You'd be doing nothing and wasting a whole day, and I just couldn't justify it. But I would have loved to have done those two. But sure, there's plenty of sports that are out there that I still haven't done. Believe it or not, I've never shot a professional baseball game. Just haven't done it. So someday I'll probably do something like that. I wanted to do the soccer games for the men's and women's for Team USA, and again, logistically just couldn't get there. So there's always something, and thank God for that, because really, when I go to each Olympics, my goal is to get something different. Like I push myself really hard to get something different for my portfolio or for the team. And I think if I got everything I wanted, then what would I have to look forward to next time, right? So it just drives me to keep going. So
keep pushing forward.
Yeah.
Now we'll close it out with this one from Michael joining us on YouTube. He wants to know, when it comes to your images, in terms of, the final output that you put out there, do you do much cropping, or is that something that's frowned upon?
No. Cropping's totally fine. Yeah, sure. I crop, straighten, do whatever. At the Olympics, you're allowed to crop. You can straighten things. You can adjust exposure and white balance. Things like that. You could do shadows, highlights. That's about it. Once you're past that, I'll crop it and send it. We're not allowed to clone things out. And there's sometimes where you look at an image and go, oh gosh, there's this one exit sign right over there. I'd love to get rid of that. And we're not supposed to. So but cropping is no problem. And sure, I crop quite a bit. Because there's times when I'll get a great shot of someone, doing gymnastics, and on the very side of the frame, I may have her teammate who's cheering, and I just get the little bit of her hand or her fist in there. Well, that looks weird. So I'll just crop it out and just team it. Sure, we'll do that.
Awesome. Just don't Photoshop people in the background.
Well, or the thing is removing and adding things. It's like, you guys all know the story about when the person added extra smoke to the clouds in the war to make it look more ominous. Well, they don't want people changing history. So in that respect, yes, they don't want us mucking with reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally makes sense. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I also want to give a huge thanks to, the sponsors of the event, Canon, for getting you here. It's always a great time when we have you here. We love it. We laugh, we cry. Honestly, I really felt, that emotion coming through when you were talking about the crowd and not having that there, that kind of hit home for me, because I can imagine for some people, this is like the ultimate, you know, culmination of all these years of hard work, and to not have those people in the stands. And
Yeah.
even on the converse, for you as somebody who's photographing that and documenting that, like you said, history, to not be able to do that, that comes through, and you
Yeah.
kind of get a little bit of sad about that. But always a pleasure to have you here sharing your work. For everybody at home, hopefully you took something away, you enjoyed Jeff's presentation. We're definitely going to have to get you back over here sometime soon when you're back from your other travels. We know you're going all
Shit, I
around.
think I'm back in a week or two. I'm back again. You're stuck with me again for another one. I think in another week or so.
I'm stuck with you again. All right, I
and,
gotta run.
and there you go. You should. And for anybody who didn't get any questions answered, feel free to email me. I'll be more than happy to answer them in case we didn't get to any.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. To everybody at home tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in. We've got a ton of great content coming your way for the remainder of the day, as well as the rest of the week. So make sure you tune in. But